One miracle after another. The Pavel Goya story. Chapter 5. You don't exist. What am I going to do with my life? Pavel wondered. I've dreamed of becoming a pastor all my life. But that seems rather unrealistic, since seminaries have been all but eliminated by communism. Besides, why should I have a miserable life when I don't need to? He reasoned. Perhaps I should become a music teacher. Or an engineer, he thought, as he pondered the path that would define his life. Carefully, he evaluated each option. I have always loved music. Maybe I should make that my life study. On the other hand, if I became an engineer, I could not only get a good job, but could design my own house. The years I've spent working with my father in the building business would surely prove advantageous to me as an engineer. For several days, Pavel wrestled with what career he should pursue. Pavel was not excited about another obstacle to his dreams. High school would soon be over, and a trip to the military draft registration center was mandatory for every young man 18 years of age. A stiff prison sentence awaited those not taking the time to register or thinking to opt out of the military. Before continuing his education, he would have to serve his country. The government had two options for military service. Just 9 months of service was required for those able to pass the entrance exam at one of the universities, which was much more attractive than the second option. For those not attending university, a 1.5 years of military service was required. He would need to decide on a career soon. The shorter option was an easy first choice for all, but it was even more than just a good idea for a Christian. The military made no exceptions for those desiring to serve God. Pavel had heard enough stories to know that remaining faithful to God would be the most difficult experience he would ever face. In spite of what undoubtedly awaited him, he would have to make the trip to the military registration center as soon as possible. Without a registration card, his life would be on hold. This card was required for everything, from getting a driver's license to applying at the university. He could not put it off another day. He needed his card. I would like to fill out my draft registration card, Pavel said, as he approached the officer attending the front desk. Fill out this form using your full name, instructed the officer. After completing the form, he placed it on the counter to be processed. Pavel Goya, repeated the officer quietly to himself as he walked over to the filing cabinets lining the wall. After several minutes of searching the file cabinet drawers, the officer looked up in obvious frustration. This is impossible, he said, looking up from the last cabinet. Nothing like this has ever happened as long as I've worked here. Our records are updated and audited on a regular basis, but we have no file for you. You simply don't exist. It is as if you were never born, he said in disbelief. The whole thing seemed a bit humorous to Pavel. He smiled, thinking about all that could be enjoyed by a person never having to face consequences. If he didn't really exist, what could be done to him? So then, what you're saying is that if I hit you right now, there's nothing you can do to me because I'm not really here? Pavel joked. I don't think that would be one of your brightest moments. If you try it, you'll find out in a hurry that I'm very much here. You exist all right. I just can't find you in our system. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do for you, the puzzled officer concluded. Pavel stood there, wondering what to do next. He had always thought he existed. It was an entirely new concept to discover that his existence had really just been an illusion. Well, if I don't exist, at least I won't have to go to the military. That's good news, he said, seeing the bright side of the moment. But all at once, he remembered his reason for coming. He needed his registration card in order to apply at the university. The bad news is that I won't be able to go to school, he stated seriously. That's right, agreed the officer. They would put you in prison for missing your time in the military. You must come back on your own to register. Aren't you getting a little confused as to who would go to prison? Pavel countered. I just came to register, and you didn't do it. So it would be you who is going to prison. You need to find me. I can't go to school without my registration card. I can't leave here without it. You have to do something, Pavel pleaded. The officer disappeared into the next room for a moment, returning with the general. After a quick briefing, the general took his turn searching each file cabinet, but the documents were nowhere to be found. The general went over to the desk for a pen and paper. I'm going to write you a note of temporary exemption so that you can register for the university, but you must promise me that you'll come back again after we have had the time to look for your documents. I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to trust you to come back, he said with a smile. Pavel thanked him and assured him he would come back. So, armed with a note bearing the general's signature, he walked out the door, thanking and praising God. With several years of construction experience already in place, surely becoming a building engineer would be his best choice. His next step would be to make application to the university for his engineering degree. He was going to become a building engineer. In communist Romania, however, this would not be an easy task. Only a handful of the brightest students would be accepted for each degree offered. He was all too familiar with the system. His sister had been studying music and practicing the piano for many years for one of the positions offered in music. The only possibility of reaching the required excellence was to hire a private tutor. Each lesson was followed by daily practice sessions lasting 8 hours. This had been her diligent pursuit, not for months, but for many long years. At last, with God's blessing, she had achieved her goal. From the 1,200 applicants auditioning for the opportunity to study piano at the university, she had been awarded one of the 5 positions. Pavel was proud of his sister's prestigious accomplishment. What brother wouldn't be? He knew it would be equally challenging to be accepted to one of the universities offering a degree in engineering. Only the top 10 applicants would be accepted. With such overwhelming odds, only straight A students dared to enroll for the qualifying exam. Even though Pavel had been at the top of his class since entering grade school, he knew this would be competition as he had never seen before. How thankful he was for his friendship with the all-knowing God of the universe. In earnest prayer, he submitted his plan to him. As he prayed and studied for the next few mornings, the story of Daniel and his 3 friends came vividly before him. God had blessed them with a wisdom far surpassing every other student in the land because of their faithfulness. In every category, their wisdom was discovered to be 10 times that of the other youth. Pavel repeatedly invited God to bless him in the same way if it would bring honor and glory to his name. With his note bearing the general's signature, he set out to enroll in a nearby university. After listening to his brief explanation, the registrar refused his request. No exceptions would be granted at her school. Either you had your registration card or you didn't apply. Pavel couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. But since there were other universities, he would just try another one. But one by one, each registrar offered a similar response. No registration card, no application. After attempting to register at 15 universities without success, his prospects appeared bleak. There was only one more university offering a degree relating to construction. But why even bother, he thought gloomily. Discouragement deepened with each city block he walked. His feet scuffed along the pavement, shuffling forward without purpose. Why has God let me down? He wondered. He had faithfully opened door after door for him until now. In darkness and gloom, it felt as if he had been forgotten. Deciding he had nothing to lose, he aimed his shuffling feet in the direction of the last university. Late in the afternoon, he approached the registrar's desk. "I have come to apply for the building engineering course," he began. Without waiting for the rejection he was sure would follow, he proceeded to tell the woman that he was sure she wouldn't want him either, that he might as well save her the trouble of rejecting him too. When he finally ended his miserable speech, the woman smiled kindly at him and said, "I will let you apply. It's not your fault that your papers have been lost." In his gloom, he didn't even hear her kind words. "Why wait around for words of gloom?" he grumbled, turning and heading for the door. "Wait," called the registrar. "I said I'll let you apply." Pavel stopped. "You will? Are you sure you won't get into trouble?" he stammered. "You let me take care of my business. Do you want to apply or not?" she asked with a sparkle in her eye. Within a few moments, Pavel was on his way home. He was registered for school. How thankful he was that he had not given up in discouragement. Maybe God had not forgotten him after all. He had just 3 months to study for the entrance exams, and study he did. From morning until night, day after day, he pored over every resource material he could find. At the end of 3 months, he had completed 8 mathematics books and 4 physics books, each designed as full-year courses. He had prayed for wisdom and done all in his power to fill his mind with knowledge. Now, the rest was up to God. As the date for the engineering exam drew near, each applicant received an overview for final preparation. The exam would be administered over 2 days, one day for mathematics and the other for physics. The mathematics exam would include algebra, calculus, trigonometry, and geometry. The physics exam would cover hydraulics, mechanics, electricity, and molecular physics. Pavel knew he would need God's help to be one of the university's top 10 applicants. Before leaving for his first exam, he kept his daily morning appointment with God. He knew better than to leave home alone. With peace and the assurance that God was with him, he entered the classroom. The math test was first. He was amazed at how clearly he understood each problem and its answer. With confidence, he quickly solved each one. In just half the time allotted, he walked forward with his completed exam. He could tell that God had blessed his mind with the wisdom he had requested. Feeling certain, He could also complete the second exam early. He purchased his return train ticket for home for 2:40 p.m., even though the test was scheduled to end at 4 p.m. He knew he might be cutting it a bit close, as it was a 1 to 1.5 hour bus ride from the university to the train station, depending on the traffic. But if he finished it in half the time again, he would make it without any problem. With a non-refundable ticket, he would need to make sure to finish early. Beginning his physics exam, he realized the ease with which he had taken the previous test had vanished. He was really struggling. His mind felt blank. Today, in place of instant understanding, he had none. This can't be happening, he thought in a state of panic. The professor had given his students the option of taking test A or B. He had selected test A. After 15 minutes of staring blankly at test A, he asked if he could exchange his test for the other. The professor made the exchange, but warned him that no other changes would be made. Diligently, he pored over his new exam. Slowly, the answers began to come to his mind. Finally, at 2:30 in the afternoon, he finished his last problem. He was in a real bind now. His train was scheduled to leave in just a few minutes. He had no time for the 1-hour bus ride to the train station. He would have to catch a taxi. Anxiously, he prayed, "Lord, please help me make it to the station in time." He waved frantically for a cab. Jumping in, he breathlessly pleaded for the driver to go as fast as he could to the North train station. "Did you say to drive as fast as I can?" asked the driver. "I don't think you know how fast that is." A broad smile broke out across the driver's face as he repeated the request. "As fast as I can? Get in, sonny. You'll never forget this ride as long as you live," the cab driver promised with a smirk. Before Pavel had time to shut the door, the tires squealed on the pavement beneath them. Racing towards the traffic ahead, he was sure the driver would have to slow down before reaching the maze of cars, trucks, and buses that filled the street. Slow down? Not this driver. He needed only one pedal, the accelerator. Flying along this busy boulevard at 4 times the speed of the other traffic was more than Pavel had bargained for. He had heard of cars traveling like this on 4-lane highways, but at least everyone was traveling the same speed. He held on for dear life. With white knuckles, he clutched anything he could grip, trying desperately to keep from flying around inside the car, or worse yet, out of the window. In and out of cars and trucks they wildly weaved. Surely a stripe of paint from each vehicle they passed had been embedded along the sides of the taxi, Pavel concluded as he held on for dear life. The possibility of their yellow cab being transformed to a rainbow cab did not seem all that remote. Now what? Pavel wondered as he glanced through the windshield at the busy intersection directly in front of them. He didn't have long to wait, as his driver, consumed by his mission, swerved abruptly to miss the car in front of them, whose driver had somehow come to the conclusion that a red traffic light meant to stop. With his head jerking back and forth, the cabbie searched madly for which bus or truck to squeeze between, all the while keeping his hand on the horn. Swerving wildly to avoid oncoming cars from either side, the driver continued his mad dash. Several drivers responded with their horns, just in case the crazy cabbie had not seen their expressions of displeasure or heard their shouts. Exploding through intersections without slowing down and ignoring red lights left Pavel cringing. With the rest of the traffic stopped at the red light that his driver had interpreted as go, The boulevard opened ahead of them for some distance. This provided a real run at the unsuspecting victims ahead. Suddenly the driver tipped his head back and with a burst of laughter repeated, "As fast as I can?" Looking over at Pavel, he asked for clarification. "Do you want me to go faster?" Weakly, Pavel shook his head from side to side, whispering, "No, please, don't go any faster." Again the driver laughed as he looked over at his passenger, who now looked more like a ghost than a mortal. Something ahead had caused a traffic jam. Cars were backed up for almost the whole city block. Seeing the impossibility of getting through the mass of vehicles, the driver spotted an alternate route. Without warning, he swerved to the right, hitting his brakes for the first time since the ride began. With all four tires loudly squealing and barely missing the end of the waiting cars, they skidded to the side of the road. When the cab hit the curb, Pavel's helpless body flew to the roof, then back to his seat. His white knuckles had not managed to hold him in place during this maneuver. With his head tipped back once again, his driver repeated, "As fast as I can," and down the sidewalk they raced past the waiting cars, sending screaming pedestrians and sidewalk vendors in all directions. Pavel felt like joining them, but he was unable to speak, let alone get out a real scream. Arriving at the intersection by sidewalk, they shot out between the heavy cross traffic once again, with horn blowing and swerving violently back and forth, nearly being sandwiched between vehicles coming from both directions. On the other side of the intersection, the taxicab turned race car was back on course, speeding through the city. Pavel wondered if he would live to see the train station, let alone actually ride home on one of the cars. At last, the station came into view. "There is no way even this taxi driver can get us through this one," Pavel thought with a sinking heart. Another massive traffic jam had cars backed up for what might as well have been a mile. This time, it appeared there would be no escape route. Perhaps his death-defying journey had been in vain. But once again, Pavel had underestimated the creativity of his driver. The boulevard on which they were racing was divided in the center by two sets of train tracks, one for incoming passengers and the other for outgoing. The southbound train was due to depart immediately, but the northbound track was empty. With trains constantly coming and going, even the empty tracks appeared to be out of the question. But rising to the occasion, the taxi driver quickly headed for the vacant track. Timing was now everything. Racing down the tracks alongside the waiting cars was bad enough, but the inbound and outbound trains would be passing at any moment. Even bouncing up and down the train tracks could not diminish the realization that they could be sandwiched between two trains any second. With only a split second to spare, the taxi jumped over the tracks, cutting in front of the long line of cars waiting to enter the station. In a cloud of dust, the driver slid into the station at the very lane of Pavel's waiting train. To his amazement, it had been delayed. As he climbed out of the car, the delayed train began to depart. In a flash, he grabbed his bag and made a mad dash to catch the train, gaining speed ahead of him. Over his shoulder, he thought he heard his driver laughingly call out to him, "Was that fast enough?" By the time Pavel reached the moving train, its momentum and his own were the same. With one mighty leap, he jumped aboard. Collapsing into an empty seat, he thanked his heavenly Father. "Dear God, thank you for sparing my life in that amazing taxi ride and for delaying the train just long enough for me to make it. Never had he been so grateful to catch a train before. He was alive and on his way home. The date for the exam results finally came. Eagerly, Pavel scanned the roster for his name. How had he fared against such heavy competition? He found his name near the top of the list. He had scored 4th of the 87 applicants taking the exam. The asterisk beside his name indicated that he had been accepted as a building engineer student. What an honor! He smiled to himself. Pavel knew it was God who had blessed him, just as he had blessed the faithful Hebrew youth in Bible times. Recognizing Pavel, the registrar smiled as he approached her desk. "You are one lucky young man," she said. "I know. I passed," he responded with a grin from ear to ear. "No, that's not what I mean. The military is beginning a pilot program today that will include only those students accepted to this university. Each of our students will be enrolled in the special school that until now has been only for family members of high-ranking officers. The Army is a very difficult experience at best, but those who attend this program will enjoy many privileges that the rest do not. So you see, if the military hadn't lost your file, you would have been accepted to one of the other universities and you wouldn't have been able to be a part of this elite new program. Your timing was absolutely perfect," she ended, beaming with delight. The chance she had taken on this young man had given him the opportunity of a lifetime. Leaving the registration office, Pavel began to pray. "Lord, how could I have ever doubted you? When everything started going wrong, I thought you had forgotten me. Please help me to trust you, even in the dark and lonely times when you are silent. When everything goes wrong at once, it feels like it would be impossible for anything good to work out. I just want to thank you for keeping your promise to me. You worked for my good when I really didn't deserve it. You are such an amazing father. If the woman at the university only knew you, she would know that there is no such thing as luck. You really do have a plan for my life." With a smile, he made his way home. His God had proved faithful once again. The officer at the military registration center smiled as he saw Pavel walking back into his office. "We found your file a few days ago," he announced, with a bit of relief in his voice. "Just before you came to register, we had begun painting our office. All the filing cabinets had to be moved around in order for the painter to access the walls. While one of the cabinets was being moved, a drawer fell out, spilling files all over the floor. We thought we had returned all the files to the drawer, but obviously we had missed yours. A few days ago, we finished the remodeling project. As we moved the cabinets back to the wall, we spotted a file. It was yours. It evidently slid underneath one of the cabinets during the spill. Now you exist. You really were born after all," the officer explained with a twinkle in his eye. At the end of the officer's explanation, the general looked up from his paperwork with some encouragement of his own. "Pavel, you did an excellent job in your exams. You scored very well among our nation's best students. Without the exemption note, you would never have been able to apply at the university. As a result of your excellent test scores, you'll have to spend only 9 months in the military and at our best institution. I'm glad I trusted you." "So am I," Pavel agreed with a smile as he walked toward the door. Though he was thankful for a shorter term, the fact remained that he still had to serve in the military. It wasn't long until he found himself boarding the train bound for the army base in Raniku, Valsia. As the train slowly wound its way back and forth up the steep pass over the Retezat Mountains, he tried to imagine what it was going to be like in the military while remaining true to the captain of the Lord of Hosts. Quietly, he prayed to the commander of the universe. "Lord, as captain of the hosts of heaven, help me to be true to you as my highest commanding officer. Help me to remember who is really in charge. I want to be a faithful soldier in your army here on earth." The end of chapter 5. One miracle after another. The Pavel Goya story.